if you're watching this video, you probably have a 4-week-old or there's one in your near future. And so let's get started with all the information from 4 weeks to 6 months. In today's video, we're going to talk about how many ounces your baby should be eating from the 4 week to 6 month mark, some breastfeeding support tips, and then also developmental milestones that will assist your baby with actually eating and learning to eat, which is the next step after the 6 month time frame. So first up, from 4 weeks to 6 months, so let's say a month to 6 months, your infant will need about 24 to 48 ounces of breast milk or formula during the day. And when I say the day, I'm referring to like day and night. So if you are going to sleep train your baby, like let's say you're not going to wake them up at night, or they're not going to wake you up at night to eat, they need to get the same amount of calories during the day, which is totally possible for some infants. And they're closer to 4 weeks, it's going to look more like 24 ounces or 4 ounces 6 times a day. If you're feeding around the clock, that would be 4 ounces about every 4 hours. If you remember from the first video, about how many ounces a baby takes is about how long they can go between feedings. So if they're at 4 ounces, they can go then the 4 hours. Now, if you're trying to get your baby to sleep through the night, you're gonna have to start encouraging your infant to take more than 4 ounces during the day so that they can then be full to sleep through the night more. A lot of times this might look like you drop a night feeding one by one and let them get a little bit hungrier so they take more in the morning. And we can talk more about that in depth in another video. But for now, let's just focus on the 24 to 48 ounces. Now, that seems perfect. And before I had a kid, when I was a dietitian and lactation consultant, I would tell people, yeah, your kid at about a month, they'll be taking 3 to 4 ounces every 3 to 4 hours, and you can kind of go from there. Well, I just want to give you a little bit of encouragement. My child never took more than 2 ounces every 2 hours for a very long time. Like, I want to say it was like 6 months. I'm a little foggy on the memory now, but it was never like, I remember she never got to 4 ounces every 4 hours. And I wouldn't have told you that before I had a kid. So that's where it's important to know, like, the advice that you see online or the advice you're getting from your pediatrician, yes, it's true. But there are some instances where you still are breastfeeding or bottle feeding, formula feeding, whatever. You still need to go with your baby's cues. She just wasn't really ever going to get up past that. And she was 99 percentile like the whole time. So everything was fine. She just wanted to eat a lot, and eat a little bit, and eat often. So keep that in mind, but still keep up with about 24 to 48 ounces. Now, how will you know if your baby's getting that? Especially if you're breastfeeding, that can be one of the most stressful parts. It's kind of stressing about whether or not your baby's getting enough. That's why it's super important to make sure you're keeping up with your pediatrician so you can make sure the weight is trending in the right direction. You don't want to see weight loss at this age, and you should have recovered totally from any hospital weight loss or discharge weight loss. Another way you'll know is by making sure there are 6 to 8 wet diapers and dirty diapers every day. For a breastfed infant at this age, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, even into a few months old, they might even be having a dirty diaper after every breastfeeding session. It kind of just depends. Another thing I want to mention is around 4 weeks, my child started getting so fussy every time we eat to the point where it kind of gave me some anxiety. So I want to talk about that for just a second. There are instances where they could develop a milk protein allergy or lactose intolerant, things like that. I would be careful to jump to those. Also, it's important to know, human milk is lactose. So the natural transition for a baby, we develop more lactose intolerance as we get older, but typically babies are not truly lactose intolerant. So there are rare instances where there's something that mom's milk can't provide. Like if they end up being having milk protein allergy, you could take the milk out of your diet, and then within 24 to 48 hours, they could start having your breast milk again, but it might take their body weeks or months to actually heal the gut, to clear the blood in their store, anything like that. This video is not specifically about that, but I want to just point out that those things can start to develop later on. They might not have been there before. So around 4 weeks, I noticed my baby was getting fussy every time she started eating, and I got a little kind of anxiety every time I would feed her, because I'm like, oh, she's going to be so upset after this. It's going to take forever to calm her down. So I talked to my pediatrician about that, and he said, we can keep watching it. There could be something, but honestly, her body's new. She's learning how to eat. She's learning everything. All of the foods that you're eating are going into there, and they're all new. Sometimes they just have to work that out. And I'm so glad I didn't overthink that or panic about it or dwell on it. I just told myself I would give it 1 to 2 weeks to see if it got any better. It did, and we moved on. But it was really stressful. So I want to tell you, especially if you're a new mom in that 4-week window of time, it can be really stressful when things like that start to happen. Be sure you're communicating with your pediatrician or lactation consultant to make sure there's no latch issues going on. Or if you are using a formula, make sure you don't need to change formulas or anything like that. Be careful of changing formulas too frequently. That can cause problems that you just can't figure out what the actual problem is. But also, stay in touch with healthcare providers, but calm yourself down as much as possible and say sometimes their bodies just need to work through some things. We don't need to change anything maybe until we give it some time to see if there's a true issue here. That being said, there are true issues. This video is for not true issues, so if you have any of those, be sure to check with your healthcare provider. Okay, we talked about how much an infant should be taking every time. And also keep in mind that there are certain growth spurts or windows of time where breastfeeding can be. Keep in mind that there are certain growth spurts or windows of time where the baby might take more formula, more breast milk than before, and then they might actually go back to a pre-growth spurt amount too, so don't let that discourage you too much, but definitely just try to notice it. Typical growth spurts are around 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, and 6 months. So around those time frames, and it could be 4 weeks just because it says 3 to 6, like it could be 4 weeks, 7, it doesn't really follow a perfect guideline. Just keep in mind around those times, if your baby starts trying to latch more often, more frequently, or maybe they start to take more volume, but then a couple weeks later it goes back to pre-growth spurt volume, it's not necessarily that there is any kind of problem. So keep in mind those different growth spurts. Well, they're naturally, maybe they were sleeping through the night, but around 6 weeks they start waking up through the night. That could be because they're having a growth spurt, so they actually need more nutrition than they were getting the week before when they were sleeping through the night. So it doesn't mean all of your hard work, if you did have them sleeping through the night, is going to go and regress. It just means this might be a week where they actually need more intake through the day to be able to sleep through the night. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, we talked about volumes your infant should be needing around this time frame, 4 weeks to 6 months. Now we're going to move into some breastfeeding tips. For breastfeeding, around 4 weeks, they're starting to get a little more sturdy. They're not the most sturdy thing, but it's a little different than breastfeeding a newborn, and you should start to be getting into kind of a groove and routine. It's great to make sure your latch is still a good latch at this point, because they've grown and they've gotten better at breastfeeding, and then you've grown and you've gotten better at breastfeeding. It might be a good time to make sure you're paying attention to any differences in latches or different positions that might work better for you at this time in this age. And that's especially true the older they get. So when they start to get head control, when they start to maybe even sit up, they're going to feel comfortable in a different position than before. And so don't be afraid to try new positions than what's working. Just make sure if there's anything that just sticks out to you, just mention it to your pediatrician and make sure there's no issues going on. As a mom, make sure you're staying hydrated and well nourished, of course. You're already not getting the greatest amount of sleep, I'm assuming, right? So it's important to make sure you stay hydrated. If you're breastfeeding, every time you sit down to breastfeed, you need water anyway. So keep a cup of water kind of at every breastfeeding or pumping station. And then for nutrition, when you are short of sleep, so when we lack sleep, we naturally choose carbohydrate foods. And so you do want to make a conscious effort to maybe start thinking about combining those carbohydrates with some good protein, some good vegetables, so you're getting a well-balanced meal and good nutrition just to help keep you strong and your immune system strong and everything like that as you keep kind of growing into this motherhood stage. And then also around 12 weeks, a lot of moms go back to work. And so a lot of people worry about pumping before they return to work. And I think that you can, but 4 weeks is around the time where you could start trialing pumping and seeing if that's something that you could do to help create a freezer stash. We'll have a whole nother video about that because that's a whole other topic in itself. But I wouldn't start pumping before 4 weeks unless you medically have to, right? But if you have been waiting to this 4 week mark to start pumping, that's when you would start pumping. But you never want to replace the infant's intake feed with a pumping session. Instead, what I would recommend is just adding a 10-minute pumping session after every morning feed. In the morning, you typically have more milk because you've gone a little bit longer overnight, hopefully, without feeding the baby. And so give them milk from the morning feed. And then when they're finished with their normal feed, go ahead and immediately do a 10-minute pump session after. And that should honestly give you enough freezer stash or milk supply to kind of help make you feel great about going back to work. Remember the growth spurts. Remember that for breastfeeding especially, this is your baby's way of telling your body they need more milk. They might be fussier than normal. They may latch more than normal. They may take more at a time. So just keep those things in mind and try to relax into just kind of letting the baby lead still, because it's still a newborn baby. So this is still really early on. As the months go on, you'll start to learn your baby a little bit more. And then also you might be able to try new positions while your baby's getting more head control. So keep that in mind too, and try to make sure you're staying comfortable while you are pumping. And then you can also introduce bottles at this time. A lot of people worry about you have to have a bottle before they go back to work, and most of the time that's not really an issue. Bottle confusion is not necessarily an issue for healthy babies. It can be, but you could probably add one bottle if you wanted your spouse to do a bottle. There's also something called a dream feed. People will sometimes do at like 10 p.m. where you could have your spouse do that bottle and you could go to sleep. Just keep in mind, even if your baby is sleeping through the night, that might not necessarily mean that you don't need to remove milk during the night. After about 4 hours, your body probably still needs to remove that milk anyway, especially in the beginning. This is not the same thing for like 4, 5, and 6 months. You could probably make it 6 hours. But we're not talking about an 8 to 10, 12-hour stretch at night. Your breasts are going to become too engorged for that most of the time. It just depends. But I would think about that too in like 4-hour stretches. You might need to still wake up and pump even though your baby's sleeping through the night. In fact, I would really recommend that, because at the 4-week mark, 6 week, 8, if your baby does start sleeping through the night and you start skipping all of those night pumping sessions, then it's going to kind of downregulate your milk supply. It's going to tell your body you don't really need it at night, and then you'll kind of like downregulate that supply. So I'd be very careful of doing that, and I would plan to wake up about every 4 hours to pump, regardless if your baby does or not. And that's kind of just talking about just some pumping tips too, but we'll have more videos on pumping in the future. Lastly, we're going to talk about some developmental milestones that will help your baby during this window of time for feeding. Around 2 months, babies start to smile and become more alert, which can make feeding more interactable. So that's fun. And then you can kind of know, like, they'll start to coo or whatever, and like help you feel like they're actually, enjoying this bonding time. It's a great bonding experience for nursing mothers. So keep that in mind around 2 months. That also means at 2, 3, 4 months, they become a little more distractible. So it might be time for you to find a quiet nursing place. You might not just be able to nurse wherever, whenever anymore. If you're at a restaurant you're used to nursing, by 3 months, it's probably gonna be more difficult. By 4 months for sure, because your baby's just interested in its surroundings. So trying to cover it up is great. But honestly, I never felt like that worked. I felt like you had to really like go into the back room and like be by yourself so they would focus on eating. Because just because they're more, interacting with their environment doesn't mean they actually don't still need to eat. But when they start learning about their environment and exploring more, they might be more interested in their surroundings instead of eating. And you want to make sure you still offer those set eating times without distractions. But around 3 months, they might also start to finish earlier. Like, a lot of people will send me messages saying they used to nurse for 15, 20 minutes and now they're down to 10. And I'm like, well, they're 3 months old. They're just better at it. So they've gotten better at it over time. And so it makes sense that it would take less time for them to remove the same amount of milk. Don't let that discourage you. As long as the weight gain is still steady and they still are having the same amount of set wet and dirty diapers, then I don't worry too much about the time. They're becoming more efficient. So that's great. And then around 4 months, they start to become more interested in like watching you eat. But this does not mean that they're ready to actually eat on their own. The American Academy of Pediatrics used to recommend 4 months is a good time to introduce solid foods, and now recommend 6 months. 6 months is definitely better. If you have a 4-month-old, you realize they're not really like that steady. They're still not doing things that would say they're ready to eat. So I'll never forget, people would tell me, oh, she wants that cupcake. I'm like, no, that cupcake is red. So she sees that it's red. My 4-month-old does not know that she wants this cupcake. So let's just wait, guys. So keep that in mind. People will start to pressure you to feed your baby, and it's totally fine for you to say we're waiting till 6 months because we're breastfeeding only, or we have formula only. It's totally fine. 6 months is totally appropriate and they're recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the WHO of infant feeding. So exclusively breastfed for 6 months is the way to go. And then we'll talk about in the next video infant feeding cues to help you know your baby's getting ready to eat, and then how to introduce foods at 6 months also. Another thing to consider with breastfeeding is vitamin D. There are 2 ways that you can get a supplement of vitamin D in your baby. First, if you're breastfeeding, you can take 6,400 international units of vitamin D yourself as the breastfeeding mom, and that will help give your the body enough to get that vitamin D into the milk supply as well. Or you can give a supplement to the infant itself. You can mix that in the breast milk, you can mix it, or you can just try to do a droplet, whatever's easier for you. I personally do prefer for the mom to take 6,400 international units because I don't like supplements that have junk in them. And if it's really hard to find a pure supplement, I actually didn't find one at the time, which my baby was born in 2022, so I couldn't find one at that time. If you know of a supplement that's pretty clean for infant vitamin D, link it below to help other moms out. That would be awesome. But I'm not a fan of like all the additives that go into all those things. And also if your baby, I had a friend whose baby had a reaction to the vitamin D or iron supplement, I can't remember. And we weren't really sure what it was from because there's so many added things in there. It's just hard to pick out that one thing that irritated that baby, right? So I'm a fan of the mom taking 6,400 international units. And then that's hard to get in like pill form. It's kind of a lot. So there is a drop form that I like, and I will try to link that below too so you have that information. Any form is fine. The drops were just easier for me to get in on top of like all the prenatal vitamins and stuff that I was already taking. Another thing to keep in mind with vitamin D is sunlight. So sunlight helps our body take the actual vitamin D that we have and convert it into the active form of vitamin D. And this is like not sunscreen sunlight. So I know that it's like so taboo to not wear sunscreen, but for a few minutes outside, it's going to be a big deal for your body to actually make vitamin D by having some actual sunlight. In the summer, this is a lot easier, but in the winter, it can be hard. So if you've got a younger baby in the winter, you have to kind of think about this a little more intentionally in like the middle of the day. So for me, I'm at work all day, so I wasn't really able to get that anyway for the baby. Like I wasn't telling people what to do with my baby all day. And so I just felt better knowing that they had the supplementation. So if you are at home though, it's a good idea to get that baby outside, kind of if you can, like bare chested for like 10 to 15 minutes a day to kind of get that vitamin D activated. Any kind of sunlight on the skin is helpful, but the bare chested really helps. So that's just a few notes on vitamin D, especially for breastfeeding. If you're formula feeding, it's got the vitamins in there, and so I wouldn't stress about that. It's not, you don't really need to supplement at that time. Today we talked about how many ounces and feeding times to get your infant to take a day, and we talked about some breastfeeding tips, and we talked about developmental milestones. So that's it for this video. If you like this video or you found this interesting, be sure to subscribe so we can keep making content like this, and share it with your friends or new moms who might be looking for this type of information. In the next video, we're going to look at 6 months and beyond.